How should the Louisville men's basketball team address the rest of the open scholarships for next season? We'll attempt to answer that on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. As always, I want to personally take this time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. We were hoping for some more men's basketball recruiting news throughout the duration of last week. Really, all we got was that Great Osobor had not made a decision, and that Louisville will be hosting top 30 recruit Kenai Roots for an official visit this weekend. No commitments have been made as of late Sunday evening, so we're going to answer the question as to how Louisville needs to address the rest of the open scholarships. We'll also talk about a key official visit on the football side of things. Jontae Gilbert, a top 100 prospect from the state of Georgia in the 2025 class, made an official visit to Louisville this weekend. And then to conclude the show, we will dive into another Monday mailbag. But like I mentioned, for the Louisville men's basketball program, I wanted to see another commitment last week. You know, it had been a couple weeks since Louisville had gotten their last one. Well, I guess not really a couple weeks, just a week with Kobe Rogers, but he's not going to be playing next season. So again, I wanted Louisville to have a commitment last week. It's mainly me being impatient, but seeing some of the top names in the front court fly off of the board, it's made me a little bit nervous. Now, I'm not panicking. Don't take me being a little bit concerned as me panicking. I'm not doing that because there still is opportunity for Pat Kelsey to transform this roster. If he hasn't done so already, most would suggest he likely has. Louisville's done a great job so far. But there are still spots that need to be filled, specifically in the front court. So how does Louisville need to address the rest of the scholarships that are open? Well, I've broken it down by a type of player for each scholarship. Let's begin by discussing who Louisville has currently. On scholarship right now, you have Wisconsin point guard Chucky Hepburn. You have James Madison star Terrence Edwards Jr. at that 2-3 spot. Abubakar Traore, the 3-4 from Long Beach State. Javon Hadley can play the 3 or the 4 from Colorado. Washington guard Corin Johnson. And then 2 players from the College of Charleston, James Scott and Rain Smith in the front court and back court, respectively. And also 2 players that will not be playing next season, BYU big man Ali Khalifa and Charleston guard Kobe Rogers. That's 9 players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's a conversation that we had last week, and I'm not necessarily sure the validity of everything, as to whether or not Kobe Rogers will be on scholarship next year. There's been talks that, or not talks, I guess I should clarify. There's rumors out there that he might not be on scholarship next year, but the NIL covers that scholarship and more, and then he gets put back on scholarship officially for the 2025-26 season. I don't know what's going to happen one way or the other. For this specific exercise, we're going to factor in 9 scholarships used. And we'll also, I guess, play the devil's advocate if it does come out that Rogers won't be on scholarship next season. But at this point, until told otherwise, we're going to assume that he's on scholarship. So what do you do with the remaining 4 scholarships available? Well, I think for starters, you have to go get a difference maker in the front court. What does that look like? Well, it could be either the 4 or the 5. Just based upon availability, it looks like there's more difference makers at the 4 Then there is the 5 at the moment. There are guys like Coleman Hawkins from Illinois, Kason Pryor from South Florida, Great Osibor. People want to make the case that he could play the 5. Look, he's more of a natural 4. I understand people want to compare him to Montrezl Harrell. He's not Montrezl Harrell. Montrezl Harrell had a 7'4" wingspan, and even then, Trez didn't play a ton of the 5 for Louisville at any point in his college career. He played some time at the 5. Most of his time was at the 4. And you would assume that Great Osibor would play that position as well. He's a 4. Can he be a small ball 5 at times? Of course. Will he? He probably shouldn't. So, Great Osibor, Kason Pryor, Coleman Hawkins, maybe JT Toppin. There's not many names out there at the moment that would raise your ceiling should they join. Now, the big man position, I don't think when you look at a guy like Ugonna Onyenso from Kentucky, maybe Musa Cisse from Oklahoma State, the Big 12 Defense Player of the Year, maybe he's a difference maker. And I guess you could classify him as a difference maker. So let's put him in there. I think the main thing you need to do is you need to go to get a difference maker in the front court, whether it's at the 4 or the 5. It's likely going to be at the 4, right? So we're going to make that the case. A serviceable 4, or not a serviceable 4, a difference maker at the 4. So whether that's Kason Pryor, whether that's Coleman Hawkins, Great Osibor, another player that withdraws from the draft, who knows? That's scholarship number 1. That raises your ceiling. It gives you a starter that can be the go-to guy in the front court. I know you're saying, well, Abubakar Traore and Javon Hadley can play the 4. Yes, can play the 4 is a lot different from automatically playing the 4. Both of those guys are under 6'7". No disrespect, but we need some more size on this team. That is a difference maker, or going to get a difference maker in that regard. Next up, playing off of the first scholarship, number 2 is a serviceable center. Now, that looks like a player that can play his role, defend the rim, attack the glass, rebound the ball well, and finish around the rim. He doesn't have to be a great shooter. That's the thing about it is you've got shooters on the team. Now you need guys that can bang down low, can rebound the ball, can protect the rim, and be a force to be reckoned with in the paint. That's where you bring in Ugonna Onyenso, who not a great offensive player, but one of the best shot blockers in the country. Musa Cisse, if you don't consider him to be a difference maker, which honestly, I mean, he is, but bringing up the statistics there for Musa, give me 1 second while this, actually, Musa Cisse didn't come from Oklahoma State. He came from Ole Miss, played the 2 years before that at Oklahoma State, but he only averaged 4 points a game, 4.6 rebounds. He would be a serviceable center, 7 foot, 230 pounds. Having a player who knows his role and can play it to perfection in the middle, like you don't have to have a guy that's going to score 20 in the middle. If you have the solid perimeter players, then you can go out and get a serviceable center. That's why I'm saying if you get a difference maker inside and then a serviceable center, your starting 5 is looking really, really good. And at that point, you've got 2 more scholarships to fill. So what do you do with the remainder of those scholarships? And this is where, a player like Kenai Ruths comes into play, a rotational piece in the front court. I think James Scott is going to be a rotational guy that can play the 5, play some solid minutes at the 5 as a potential backup. But you also need a rotational player in the front court. This is where Kenai Ruths comes into play, and he would check off the box that is scholarship number 3. Because as good as he is, a top 30 player, 6'8", can play the 3 or the 4. His offensive game is growing, very solid slasher, athletic. You can't expect a freshman to come into Louisville and be a great starter right away. The historical numbers just don't support that. It would be a true outlier. But Roots could come in and be a guy that is in the rotation and plays well and plays his role well and is a backup off the bench, but he's definitely in the rotation playing a certain role. That would fill the third scholarship. Number 4 is simply best player available. Because at that point, if you get a serviceable center, you have James Scott already, so you have 2 very good centers. You get a difference maker at the 4. You get a rotational front court player. You going at least 2 deep at every position in the front court, and then if you need to, you have a Boubacar Traore or even Javon Hadley that can, translate over into the front court and play at that 4 spot, and maybe one of those guys at the 4 can play the 5. Then you're looking at a best player available. Which player can come in and raise your ceiling? With these guys opting out of the draft and coming back to college, this is where it would make a ton of sense. As you go out and you get the best player available, whether that's in the front court, whether that's in the back court, it doesn't matter to me. Whoever you feel like can help your team in the most positive way. And now the argument that, let's say, devil's advocate, Kobe Rogers is not on scholarship, so you have a scholarship to fill. For me, not many options at the moment. I would either then maybe a rotational guard, a rotational point guard, because you have Chucky Hepburn, Corin Johnson, Rain Smith. Maybe you want to go out and get another backup guard. That would be a potential spot, but then the best player available, you're probably looking to fill that guard need. I would say a multiple-year guy that you feel like you can develop. So then in 2025-26, you have a head start in the roster. You have Ali Khalifa, Kobe Rogers, and insert player here, maybe even in some other players that opt to come back. So that's how I would address this roster. Difference maker at the 4, serviceable center, rotational front court player, best player available is how I would look at this. Maybe backup point guard might replace best player available, but at this point, that's where I am at for the scholarships for the University of Louisville. Let's put basketball to the side for the moment. The football team says, hey, look, we've got some exciting news, and exciting news they had indeed. Top 100 2025 prospect Jontae Gilbert was on campus for an official visit this weekend. Going to be an uphill battle, as these types of recruitments are, but Louisville is taking a huge swing at a player from the state of Georgia. We'll discuss that recruitment here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Cardinal fans, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to continually find yourself turning down the volume with all that shouting? Look no further. You can make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Jontae Gilbert is I say top 100 prospect, but according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, he's currently ranked as the 101st best prospect. So if you want to criticize me for being one spot off, go ahead. But Jontae Gilbert, nonetheless, is an elite prospect in the 2025 class, playing in the city of Atlanta, 10th best cornerback nationally, 16th best in the state of Georgia, was on an official visit to Louisville this weekend. And by all accounts, Louisville has a very fair opportunity to get a commitment from Jontae Gilbert. They are right in the mix. Now, the team to beat right now for Gilbert is Clemson. Clemson has gotten at least one crystal ball projection. I think, honestly, two of them, if I'm not mistaken. Steve Wiltfong, before he left for On3, made a prediction back in December to the Clemson insider Corey Frabel and Steve Wiltfong back on December 16th. So not much movement then. But Gilbert has made it fairly clear that he is going to exhaust all options in his recruitment. Louisville got the official visit, which was the first official visit for Gilbert, but he then begins a very busy next couple months. In a couple weeks, he will be at Central Florida. He will then go to South Carolina, Tennessee, and then Georgia State for official visits. He'll wait until the fall and then get an official visit for NC State on September 27th. He played two ways at Douglas High School, played both wide receiver and defensive back, is also a member of the track team. Andrew Ivins had this to say about Gilbert. A longer-framed defensive back prospect with traits worthy of molding for the long haul, measured just over 6'1", multiple times summer before junior year. Repped at both safety and cornerback early on in prep career and made plays at both spots while facing respectable Atlanta-based competition. Viewed by some coaches as more of a safety, might be best suited as an outside role in a physical snap-to-whistle cover scheme, given what he has put on tape thus far, as he's not afraid to use his hands and squeeze vertical routes. Offers upside as a run defender, top-end speed. A bit of a question mark given lack of data points, but should be viewed as a potential multiple-year impact player for a Power 5 program if he can keep progressing. 6'1", 185 pounds. Jontae Gilbert is what Louisville is looking for, because after this season, you're going to lose a good amount of your defensive backs. It's probably going to be the number one need in the transfer portal next offseason and in the high school class. You're losing Quincy Riley. You're losing Corey Thornton. You could lose some other players. Taz Nicholson from Illinois. MJ Griffin could probably go to the NFL. Devin Neal. Blake Ruffin. Maybe Ben Perry. The list goes on. You're going to have to replace multiple, hence the word multiple, scholarship spots on the back end of that defense. And it's critical that you bring key players in. Not only via the transfer portal, but also for the future, like an Aaron Williams-esque recruit. Now, there aren't that many Aaron Williams-esque recruits in the high school ranks, right? I mean, Aaron Williams was an elite high school prospect. There are some. Jontae Gilbert is one of those type of prospects. Not going to be easy, right? I mean, if you're going to try to recruit an upper echelon of recruits, you're going to face an upper echelon of competition. And Gilbert has currently slated his commitment date for October 19th. Now, people say, well, he didn't commit after the visit. It must not be, serious. It's different in high school ranks. We're too much in basketball transfer portal and football transfer portal mindsets, right? The main thing for Louisville is, that's great. Get him back on campus in the coming months. Get him on a game week. Get him here for a game before he makes that commitment. That's what you have to do for these top prospects, is you have to get them on for unofficial visits. You have to get them on campus for official visits. And then you also have to get them back onto campus for games. That's the thing here, is that Louisville's done the groundwork. They've gotten the official visit, and hopefully it goes well. I mean, it's Sunday evening when we're recording this, so I'm not necessarily sure how good of a visit that has sort of turned into at the moment. But at this point, you have to put in that work, and you have to get to a spot to where you're within striking distance. Right now, Clemson seems like the school to beat at the moment. And that's understandable. I mean, Clemson is doing a great job. They've always done a great job of recruiting the Atlanta area. It's fairly close to Clemson, South Carolina, in the grand scheme of things. So something to focus on. But where Louisville sits, you have to feel good that they got the first official visit. You continue to build that relationship. the Locked On Podcast Network recruiting analyst Brian Smith came onto the show, and he's mentioned this multiple times, is that Louisville is at a disadvantage because there's not a geographical sense there. There's not that blue blood program that you have. But what they have to do is that they have to exert maximum effort right away. You have to get a player onto campus for an unofficial, an official, and back on campus for a game. So I like that Louisville is bringing on these types of players for official visits, because to play the devil's advocate, people say, well, how significant is it? Well, it's a lot more significant than not having this player on for an official visit. That is the main thing you have to focus on. If you don't get them on campus for an official visit, it does not matter. You're not going to land that player. So it's significant in itself. And we'll see what comes of this official visit. Hopefully some solid news, but we're going to not get too high, not get too low. But there will be other players that will be on for official visits coming up over the duration of the month. To conclude the show, however, we will dive into yet another Monday mailbag segment. And there's some great questions to answer that I want to address here. Before we do that, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Couple of great questions that I'm going to answer on today's episode, or today's edition of the weekly mailbag segment. First question is centered around the football side of things, and it is a question that was sort of geared towards a segment that Jacob Lane and I did last week about whether or not Louisville should be ranked top 25 to start the season. The question reads, why would someone believe that Louisville should not be a preseason top 25 team? And I think that that's a very good question, is offering the rebuttal to the stage. And I think that there's a couple different reasons. Number one, the fact that this team lost their final 3 games of the year. There's a lot of uncertainty. You do have to replace a lot, but you do bring back a ton as well. And you brought in a solid transfer portal class. So maybe you could say it was how they ended 2023. And potentially, I think that that's really the only thing that I look at. And I go and say, that is why they should be in the top 25. Because right now, they've got the returning pieces. They've got the transfer portal pieces. And, I don't know. The Louisville is a top 25 team, in my opinion. So, moving right on along, I want you to predict the leading rusher and leading passer or pass receiver for next year's team. Very good question. Wasn't really a question. It was more of a statement, a request, but a question nonetheless in its entirety. Leading rusher, I am going to go with – this is tough. I'm going to go with Maurice Turner. I think it's up in the air between Don Chaney Jr. and Maurice Turner, but I'm going to go Maurice Turner. I think he's going to get a good amount of the workload, and he's going to turn it into some positive numbers. The pass catcher, it's going to be Colin Lacey, in my opinion. South Alabama transfer that didn't have a great spring game, but neither did Jamari Thrash. I look for Lacey to bounce back and be a stronghold in this wide receiving group. So fairly easy for me. Outside of that, Ja'Cory Brooks, maybe Chris Bell is a dark horse that I would love to see, like the FanDuel numbers on that. Who's going to be the leading receiver? Chris Bell, I think, would be like a very popular dark horse that people would bet on. So I'm going to go Don Chaney. I'm going to go, or not Don Chaney. I'm going to go Maurice Turner. I'm going to go Colin Lacey. Louisville baseball got blown out 3 straight games to North Carolina. It seems like they're on the outside looking in for the tournament. What needs to change this offseason? I think number one, baseball NIL has to get better. I think that, I would be remiss if I said that baseball NIL doesn't need improvement. I feel like it definitely does. I think there has to be more of a willingness to go into the portal and get players via the portal that can help your team. And something has to change pitching wise. You have to address pitching. You have to, I don't know if it's a staff change that needs to be made, whatever needs to happen, but something has to change pitching wise because pitching has not been good since 2019. I'm not even going to say 2020 because there wasn't really a season. Hasn't really been good since 2019. Even in the 2022 season, when they made it to the Super Regionals against Texas A&M, it was sort of shaky then too. So they need to address pitching, and they need to just continually be more urgent in the transfer portal is really all that I can say. Moving over to the men's basketball side of things, Wesley Yates has been a player that has been focused on time and time again, but has not committed. How is that going to affect what Louisville does for the rest of the portal? I don't think Wesley Yates has committed anywhere, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's I really have no clue where Wesley Yates is going to go. I doubt it's going to be Louisville. Let me put it that way. In fact, he released a top list that Louisville wasn't even in the mix. It was Gonzaga, Stanford, Washington, Texas, Houston, Arkansas, LSU, Auburn, and Baylor. So to answer your question, he's not going to be in the mix here for Louisville. There's been a Georgia basketball player that has been introduced to the conversation that apparently Louisville is after. Do you think he should be Louisville level? I'm not really seeing the hype. So they're talking about Frank Anselm eBay, I think is how you pronounce his name, if I'm not mistaken. Spent the past 2 years at Georgia. The two before that was at Syracuse. He's yet to average over 3 points a game and average over 15 minutes per game in any of his college seasons. So, I mean, I don't see the hype either, truthfully. I mean, at the end of the day, he would be like your third option at center if you just wanted to fill a scholarship and just wanted a depth piece. But no, I agree with you. I don't really see what the hype would be there. So, just my opinion. But that is going to wrap up today's Monday mailbag and today's episode of the show. Everyone, have a great day. Have a great start to your week. Be sure to like, share, subscribe to the pod. The pod just surpassed 2,500 YouTube subscribers, so definitely appreciate it. But to find the show on all streaming services, be sure to tune in to this graphic.